Hello everybody, and today we're going to talk about color toning. Now we have here an image of a wonderful actress, Amia Miller, and the makeup was provided by Jill Clark. Shot this a few months ago in LA. So color toning. So this is image as is. It is retouched, but it is not color toned. So this is a retouched image, but it has not been modified. The colors have not been modified or touched. So the colors are straight from the camera. So the color toning is kind of an optional procedure. I mean, not everybody does that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with keeping the colors natural if that's what you're doing. It's even more okay to leave colors natural if you're doing, say, headshots, because in headshots we really want to see the true colors of people's skin tone. So really changing it could affect the way their portfolio is perceived. You don't want, a model be perceived as she has one tone of skin tone, and then she actually shows up to go see and she has a different skin tone. We don't want that to happen. So kind of portfolio work and headshots and stuff like that, I would probably not color tone. However, if you're making images for magazines or you're doing editorials or personal work or just images for Instagram, there's nothing wrong with some color toning. Sometimes can make an image more dramatic. Sometimes kind of can simplify the color palette a little bit, and this way bring the attention of the viewer directly to the subject. So how do we do color toning? I do my color toning in Photoshop. I occasionally play and modify with it in Lightroom, but 99% of the time I'm doing it in Photoshop. The main secret behind color toning, in my opinion, and the difference between like a better done and worse done, is whether the image was desaturated first. And that is a very important step in my personal process. So the way I do that, I just create adjustment layer and saturation, and here you have the saturation slider, and you can anywhere between 0 and 50 is acceptable depending where you like it. I usually try to stand between like 25 and 35. So let's do like I would drop it at around 31, say. And so here we go, where the image is desaturated, so original colors are a little bit muted. And now we're gonna do the color toning. So we create that, and we open color balance layer, where we have there are many different ways to do color toning. This I'm showing you just the one that I use the most. To me, it's kind of like almost second nature, but there are other ways to do it as well. But today we're going to talk about this one. So through color balance adjustment layer. So we have shadows, midtones, and highlights. I rarely mess with midtones. Usually I work with highlights and shadows. There are different things you can do. One of the common ones, especially for outdoorsy work, is to make an image a little bit warmer. And the way it's usually done is by simply bringing a little bit of more yellows in the shadows. Don't go too crazy. I mean, this image is not ideal for it. This whole yellowing is good for outdoorsy fall kind of shots or sunset pictures. Those are ideal. Sometimes you just drop like 10-11 points into yellow and you're good to go. Also, another one thing to mention is this preserve luminosity button. You can use it or not. But basically, I'll show you if I do the same adjustment with preserve luminosity clicked on, and it's going to be different. See, I'm sliding it back and forth with it switched on, and then I'm gonna remove it and adjust it like that. It just reacts to it differently, especially with some, like, see, with the blues. So basically, if it is clicked on, you change a little bit of the contrast of the image. So for example, if I'm bringing in the blues here, you can see that there's also darkening that's happening. I'm not quite sure per se why it is called preserve luminosity. I'm not a tech guru. That's a question for the Photoshop people. But just like you can work with it or without it, just keep in mind you can really, once you start in one, you stick with that. So actually, typically I work with preserve luminosity clicked on. Because I like when my images are a little more contrasty, so I have no issue with contrast being slightly adjusted into that direction. So I showed you the one that is just making the image a little bit warmer and just bringing in the yellows like that, as I pointed out, like this, and here I'm going to do the opposite. So here what I typically do, I usually drop shadows in a 10 approximately, and then I go to highlights, especially for this image, because basically I want blue shadows, and I want the highlights, the sky and her skin, to be kind of warm toned. So I'm going to go to highlights and start bringing out the yellows until I'm happy with it. So there will be more sunsetty. Here we go. And here we go, the before and after. Now you might like the drama, you might not like the drama. It clearly looks a little less natural, a little more cinematic. Well, not surprisingly, the reason it looks a little more cinematic is because most of the movies are color toned in one way or another. And this blue shadows and orange highlights, it's actually one of the most common cinematic color tones that exists. Virtually any movie that you watch, especially nowadays, pay attention how blue the shadows are and how warm the highlights are. So it is done a lot. So this is a very common trick, and it instantly looks like, well, I mean, the makeup and hair here also help, because it kind of does look like an old Hollywood picture. And so yeah, but if you add the cinematic kind of color toning, it looks even more so. As you can see, it's all very basic. Now. What else? Well, the other way, for example, to do it would be like, there's a famous movie, Amelie. I don't know if you've seen that or not. Highly recommended. One of my favorite movies of all times. But Amelie was cross-processed. What that means is that they actually processed the color film in a different color chemistry. I don't remember which is which. Did they process seafood, the color film in negative chemistry? I mean, in positive chemistry, or vice versa. I do not quite recall. But nonetheless, so what happened there is they still had yellow highlights, orangey warm highlights, but the shadows in Amelie are not blue, they're actually green. So if you look at the movie, you will recognize that this is the color palette they went with. So kind of green shadows and warm So if you just type in your search bar Amelie, and you will see this color palette all over that movie. So here we go. So the main, just to touch up, I mean, you can play around and make it yours any way you want, and every image will ask for a different, so there is no shortcuts. I really never do it with any kind of presets or saved stuff, because every image is different. Color tones, skin tones are different, eye colors are different. So this one, for this particular image, I chose the one that I was showing you, where I did the shadows at around 10 and the highlights these are all zeros. So that's the one I went with, because I just wanted kind of like an old Hollywood sunset picture. So that's the colors I chose. Now we lost a little bit of the blue in her eyes. As you can see, her eyes are a little more blue than because while color toning, I lost a little bit of blueness in her eyes. I could easily bring it back, so because we basically got a little bit of that warm tones in her pupils. You can bring it back in Lightroom. In Lightroom, I would go back, just take a brush, choose the color temperature brush, and just carefully brush a little bit on the pupils, and shift it towards the cooler temperatures, and that will bring some of the blue back to her eyes. Just don't go crazy with that, because you don't want it to start looking really weird. Anyways, so here we go, the color toning. So to repeat a few things, don't forget to desaturate the original image that you start to color tone. This way, simply it does not compete with the old colors. It just, trust me. It's just like you get really weird hues, and if you don't follow through with that. So desaturate it a little bit, and then do color balance any way you want. But I enjoy working with this color balance adjustment layer. Anyways, if you have any comments or any questions about this process, feel free to leave your questions in the comments below, and I'll try to respond to them as soon as I can. All right, thank you.